on Beaubears Island again today, and literally on the island. Going to talk about club mosses. Now, the first thing is they're not mosses, but they look like them. And a long time ago, people said, well, yeah, they look like mosses, so maybe they are. Well, we found out they're not. But this is the next step in evolution from a moss. Now, if you get down on the ground here, you see these little branches, and they have these leaves that don't look like leaves. More like what you would see in pine trees or spruce or something like that. But they look very much what you see in moss. But there are differences. These are vascular. That means they have roots. The water comes up into the leaves. Right now with the sun on it, it's doing photosynthesis, making sugar, sending it down into the roots. Mosses can't do that. They don't have roots. They don't have the plumbing system the way these do, or any of the trees here. This is the next step. And they're very old. There's many types. They're in a family called lycopods, and I'm going to get into that in a moment. But the whole idea is the connection between this and moss. These still use spores. There's no seeds in these things. They have spores. And the spores are on the undersides of these leaves. Oh, thank you for the sun there. On the underside, not now, they'll be later on in the year, they're going to develop spores. And the spores eventually will fall off, taken by the wind, find a wet place, and something like this will grow. Moss doesn't do that. They make spores, but again, in a different way, and most of them that you find in there, over here, here's some moss, right here, and actually, it's interesting, because if you look at this moss, which you probably can't see, right there, looks almost identical to that. It has the same kind of leaves as this, which is why they're called club mosses. So the whole idea is, these go back, not as far as the mosses, they go back a long time, maybe 400 million years. These go back somewhere about 320 maybe, but they were big, really big, and we're going to get into that in a moment. Okay, we're on another part of the island here with a different kind of club moss. And if you remember the other one, it kind of looked like a tree. Well, this looks like a tree with no branches. Same kind of leaves. That's not a problem. But this has just a stem and then a branch. But not the same kind. These are branches that just go straight up in a vertical way, where the other ones had branches that went out in a more horizontal way. They still have the same function. Now, something on these, which is real, I move like Rudolph Nureyev, trust me. If you could see that. Now, that's a strobilus. That's a cone, in a sense. That's where the spores are. And you can see on these right here, all of them. And these will just send up spores, and the wind will take them, and again, this whole area is a good breeding ground for these things. But the other thing I wanted to talk about with these, as well as the other ones, is that 300 million years ago, things like this were called sigillaria trees. And these things were the size of the white pines on this island. Now, you got to keep in mind, 300 million years ago, New Brunswick was about 3 degrees north of the equator. And if you think this summer's hot and humid, those would be terrifying. And not only that, they smelled. A lot of sulfur and stuff like that. They weren't the most pleasant places, but these guys liked it, or at least their ancestors. Huge trees. These and the calamites And the chordates were the massive trees that grew here 300 million years ago. And the most amazing thing is, here are their survivors. Now these guys have gone through mass extinctions where the Permian, which followed the Carboniferous, where their ancestors were alive for, wiped out 95% of all life on Earth. They survived. Now, the trees that were their ancestors didn't survive, but the spores kind of just morphed whatever way they could, and they reduced themselves in size. The Earth got cooler, and these guys are doing okay. What's going to be interesting, and I'm not making a prediction, but what's going to be interesting is they went from big trees 300 million years ago to virtually dwarf stuff that people just pass by. And if there's global warming and conditions become similar to what it was a long time ago, would these trees revert to being big? And instead of being little club mosses, well, would they be carboniferous trees like they used to be? It's going to be a question that I won't be around for, because it'll take millions of years. But it's something I ponder. A lot of times they say, oh, evolution never goes back. Well, that's true, but if conditions revert, why wouldn't what is now, both animal and plant, those that could survive, would they go back to being similar? Not the same, but similar. So when you look at this, still with the ancient way of making life, are they just waiting? Waiting maybe for us to be out of the way? And then they become king of the forest again? Don't know. I will see you next time.